Hello, students. Welcome to this another discussion video on the topic retained earnings, specifically for dividends. So at the end of the lesson, you should be able to identify the different transactions affecting retained earnings and recognize and measure the different forms of dividends. So let us discuss first the nature of retained earnings. So retained earnings is one of the accounts that we can see or we can find in our shareholders equity section of the statement of financial position. So for IFRS, it is termed as accumulated profits and or of course losses. So in this particular section here, we will try to identify what are the transactions that could affect retained earnings. No? So basically, yung retained earnings class, no, this represent the cumulative balance of the following. So cumulative, ibig sabihin, since the company or the entity operates no, since their first year of operation, so ito yung balanse na kanilang nalikom, no, in all those years of um, operating the business. Pero of course, there were transactions affecting the retained earnings. So what are those items that could affect, no, the balance of the retained earnings? So first in the list is your net income or loss for the period. So as we know that for a corporate setup, the net income for the period will be close to retained earnings. So basically, pag may net income, mag-increase ang ating retained earnings. Whereas, pag meron namang loss, magde-decrease ang ating retained earnings. Second is dividend distribution. So, yung effect ng dividend distribution or should I say even declaration na because per standards, we can already recognize decrease in our retained earnings as long as the dividends were declared by the board of directors. So yung effect ng dividend distribution ay makaka-reduce siya sa balanse ng ating retained earnings. So actually in this particular video lecture also, we'll be discussing the different forms of dividend so that malaman din natin kung at what amount should retained earnings be debited, no, for every dividend declaration and based na rin kung anong klaseng dividend ang dineclare ng board of directors. Next is the prior period errors. So I would say that retained earnings becomes the window, no, of the past ng isang entity or ng isang corporate form of entity. Like, for example, prior period errors are actually pag meron na-commit na error in the past or in the prior periods and na-close na yung or na-discover yung error only in the subsequent year or periods na na-close na no yung period kung kailan na-commit yung error. So, bali yung nangyari is hindi na-discover yung error, no, in the period or in the year when it was committed. So, na-discover siya sa next years na. So, if that's the case, any adjustments made, no, para makorek yung error na yon na nag-involve ng income or expense na account, um, should not be included, no, in the current year's operations. So that is why, no, kasi pag i-include mo doon sa current year operation, like for example, um, hindi nakapag-depreciate ng asset, no, or ng fixed asset yung entity in the prior periods. So if you're going to recognize the depreciation in the current year, when you discover the error, so ang mangyayari ay ma-overstate yung depreciation for the period. So the best thing to do is that if merong um, need na i-correct, no? I-correct sa income or expense that pertains to the past or prior periods, dapat you're going to debit or credit it to your retained earnings. So ibig sabihin, pag kunyari since sa depreciation, since expense yun, so ang effect nun, pag hindi siya nakapag-recognize ng expense, the effect is that you are actually understating your expenses and then resulting to an overstatement of your income, no? Na credit mo or clinose mo sa retained earnings. So yung gagawin natin ay to correct, no, that um non-recognition of depreciation in the current or in the prior periods in the past years. What you're going to do is you debit retained earnings. So parang i-replace mo yung ipang-replace mo yung retained earnings sa supposedly depreciation expense na ire-recognize mo. And then you credit it to your accumulated depreciation. So take note, your retained earnings ay gagamitin lang pang-replace sa any income or expense account na affected, no, which you should have or you should have earned or you should have incurred in case of expense in the past or in the prior periods. Okay? So yung prior period errors, it could be an addition to retained earnings or a deduction to retained earnings depending on the nature of the error no, na na-discover. So kung yung error ay understate ng income in the past, then you have to increase your retained earnings. But if the error has caused understatement, no, of the retained earnings, and you have to increase retained earnings pag understatement or understated yung net income in the past because of the error. Pag overstated naman yung net income in the prior periods because of that error, then you have to debit your retained earnings. Okay? Next is the changes in accounting policy. So, accounting or changes in accounting policy would actually require retrospective application. No? So, meron tayong mga accounting changes, no? Dalawa ito sila. One is this change in accounting policy. The other is change in accounting estimate. So pag change in accounting estimate, yung iyong application ng changes will be prospective. So ibig sabihin, in the current periods and in the future periods. Pero pag accounting policy yung na-change, take note that the application is retrospective. So, ibig sabihin, you really need to restate whatever was recognized in the prior periods. One of the examples of change in accounting policy is changing the cost formula that the company is using, no, in reporting its inventory. Like, for example, if in the past they're using FIFO method, which is an acceptable method also, basis standards. So from FIFO, so for example, they have opted, no, kasi they feel na mas reasonable or mas ma-present nila ng um, tama yung kanilang inventory at using the weighted average method or so na cost formula. So if that's the case, no, magkakaroon ng difference yung inventory in the beginning na present using the FIFO method as compared to the inventory that should have been kung weighted average yung ginamit. So in that case, no, kailangan nating i-adjust ang ating retained earnings, no, para i-reflect yun na change in accounting policy. So, ganun pa rin if ever na because of the change in the accounting policy, the past net income of the company is overstated, then you have to debit retained earnings. Pero pag ang result naman ng change in accounting policy is nakapag-understate ng retained earnings, then you have to credit or nakapag-understate ng profit, then you have to credit retained earnings. And then we have here reclassifications of some components of other comprehensive income. So I hope you can still recall na the items under OCI, no, other comprehensive income. So one of which, no, one of a very good example of this is revaluation surplus. No? So if you can still recall, revaluation surplus is a result of um, parang account siya, no, as which is a consequence or outcome if the entity has opted to do revaluation model instead of cost model in accounting for their property, plant, and equipment. So, pag merong revaluation, so pag naka-recognize sa'yo ng revaluation surplus, 'di ba class, you have to so depende 'yun 'di ba, yung accounting mo sa revaluation surplus is magdedepende kung depreciable ba yung asset or hindi ba depreciable asset yun na ni-revalue mo. So if ever, depreciable yun, yung revaluation surplus natin ay, um, we are going to recognize it 'no, on a staggered, you have to recognize what we call piecemeal realization of your revaluation surplus. So, ang gagawin mo, yung revaluation surplus mo, ide-debit mo, and then ita-transfer mo siya sa retained earnings. So, in case naman ng non-depreciable assets, so ang gagawin natin ay you're going to transfer na your revaluation surplus sa retained earnings only if they are already sold, no? So, pag nabenta mo na. So, yun yung mga example. So, there are still other accounts, no, na component ng OCI na pwede nating i-transfer or i-reclassify to retained earnings if um, some standards would allow us to, no, depending also on the situation. Another is retirement of preference shares in excess of the original issue price. So, um, topic ito in the previous na chapter na once you retire, preference share, tapos yung retirement price is mas mataas compared sa original issue price ng preference share. So yung parang loss natin na hindi na kayang i-absorb ng share premium na from the original issuance should be debited to retained earnings. So yan. Another is loss on sale of treasury shares in excess of share premium from treasury shares. So same then, this was discussed already in the previous video lecture. So we're in if ever no na yung treasury share ay re-ini-issue natin at a loss. So tapos hindi na kayang i-absorb ng share premium from treasury. So our last resort is to charge it to retained earnings. Okay, and then eto dito, this is reissuance ng treasury share. Ito naman, retirement na ng treasury share. So you've decided not anymore to reissue the treasury share, but i-retire na lang natin siya. So meaning pag na-retire na yan, hindi mo na siya pwedeng i-reissue kasi canceled na yung shares. So yung loss, no, na hindi kayang i-absorb ng share premium kasi mas mataas yung kasi what happened is that the cost of your treasury share, na when you purchase it back, is more than the cost or the original issue price na of the shares. So kaya hindi kayang i-absorb ng share premium yung sobra, no? Sa yung sobra. So that's why if ever may kulang nga, pag hindi kayang i-absorb ng share premium, charge natin siya as a debit to your retained earnings. Okay, so yun yung mga items no, na kapag either increase or decrease no, the balance of your retained earnings, So most probably, ito yun rin yung mga items na makikita natin sa statement of retained earnings, no, kung gagawa tayo. Kasi ito yung mga nakaka-apekto sa balanse ng retained earnings during a certain accounting period. Okay, so let's proceed. So, moving on, there are two kinds of retained earnings, no? So, yung tinatawag natin na appropriated. So, meaning restricted ito. And the other one is unappropriated. So, parang baliktad yung nasa slides, no? So, ulitin natin. This one is appropriated is restricted. So, parang nabaliktad sila. No? So, appropriated is restricted and cannot be declared as dividends. Kasi nga restricted siya, you have reserved that for something else. Whereas yung unappropriated is ito yung free, no? And can be declared as dividend. So let me just correct that. So ito corrected na siya. So the kinds of retained earnings are unappropriated and appropriated. So when you say appropriated, it's free and can be declared as dividends. So dito kukunin, no, o whatever dividends will be distributed as profit distribution among shareholders. Whereas yung appropriated is restricted. So it cannot be declared as dividends. So for example, yung board of directors, no, meron silang plano mag-expand ng business, no? So portion ng retained earnings na unappropriated ay transfer nila to appropriated para hindi siya matouch or hindi siya masama sa i-declare na dividend. So para alam nila na merong pinaglalaanan, no, yung itong retained earnings na to. So if ever naman na hindi na siya or hindi na applicable, no, like for example, kung natapos na yung pad expansion or natapos na yung or natapos na yung nabili yung assets, no, na pinaglalaanan, then you can just transfer it back to your unappropriated retained earnings. So it's a matter of reclassifying the retained earnings from appropriated to unappropriated or from unappropriated to appropriated. Okay, next is dividends. So ito na yung pinaka-discussion, no, ng ating video lecture na ito. So dividends, so pag sinabi nating dividends, these are actually distribution of earnings or capital to the shareholders in proportion to their shareholdings or percentage ownership nila, no, sa corporation. So there are two types or classification of dividends. So one is yung dividends out of earnings, no, yung tinatawag nating return on capital. So ito talaga yung parang profit distribution, no, na ng corporation. Kasi parang makaka-income or makaka-earn, no, ng income yung mga shareholders. Fruits of their capital. So parang ganun. Fruits of their investment. Whereas the other one is dividends out of capital. So this is a return of capital. Others will term this as liquidating dividend. So ang nangyari is hindi siya income, hindi siya earnings on the part of the shareholders who's receiving it, but it is a liquidation or a return of what they have invested to the corporation. So what we will be discussing na in the next na mga sections, unless mentioned, are related to dividends out of earnings or return of capital. So when we discuss dividends, no, mga dividends out of earnings, so there are three important date that they have to remember. So one is a date of declaration, second is a date of record, and the third one is a date of payment. So pag sinabing date of declaration, ito yung date, no, kung saan nag-announce or nag-approve ang board of directors na magbibigay sila ng dividend sa mga shareholders nila. So in this particular date, class, na take note that we can already recognize our payable, no? We can debit your retained earnings. Ito yung ating pro forma journal entry kapag date of declaration. So we have to recognize, no, a decrease in our retained earnings. So take note, unappropriated dapat yan, no? Galing sa unappropriated na retained earnings. And then credit tayo ng dividends payable. Okay? Next is the date of record. So sa date of record, wala tayong journal entry na gagawin. Bakit? During this date, what we are going to do is just to summarize, no, or finalize the list of the shareholders who can receive the dividend, no? Kasi um diyan natin, ayun yung cut-off period, no? Kung sinong may hawak ng shares, no? At as of this date, sila yung mga rightful recipients of the dividends, no, na na dineclare ng board of directors. So, walang journal entry, na summarize lang or finalize lang ng list of shareholders who can receive the dividends. So, parang cut-off period yan. And then, next would be the date of payment. No? So, ito na yung date kung kailan ibibigay na sa mga shareholders ang pre-namis or ang dineclare na dividend ng mga board of directors. So, of course, during this date, meron tayong journal entry. So, debit lang natin yung sinet up natin na dividends payable. And then, credit cash, no, if ever cash dividend ito, or any appropriate or other appropriate account, no? So, depende kung ano yung dividends na binigay. Kasi, baka yung binigay non-cash, no? Baka property dividend. So, pag property dividend, you have to close all of the accounts na related to the property or asset na dineclare as dividends or ipang-distribute ng entity as dividends. Okay? So, next is, ito na, no? Recognition of dividends. So, take note that when dividends are declared, no? We have to recognize a liability to pay, no, na dividends. So, kailan yan? Again, if the dividend is appropriately authorized and is no longer the discretion of the entity, which is the date when the dividend is declared. But, okay, so this one, generally speaking, when you say, kailan ba tayo mag-recognize ng liability, no, related sa dividend declaration? So, sabi natin, generally speaking, that's date of declaration. Okay? Pero per standard, ito yung sinabi ng standard. So, mag-recognize na ng liability to pay dividends when the dividend is declared by management or BOD, and if further approval is needed, no, by local jurisdiction, or if further approval by a local jurisdiction is not required na daw. So, when the dividend is declared by management or BOD, tapos hindi na siya nangangailangan ng approval by local jurisdiction, no? And then, when the dividend declaration of dividend by management or BOD is approved by the relevant authority, if further approval of local jurisdiction is required. So, take note, generally speaking, it's when the dividends are declared by the management, no? Provided that hindi na kailangan ng approval ng local jurisdiction. Pero pag local jurisdiction is needed, may approval niya, or kailangang ma-approve muna siya sa relevant, no, na authority before you can recognize liability to pay the dividends. Okay? So, what are the forms of dividends? No? So, meron tayo ditong cash dividend, which is very common. Another is property dividends. And then, take note class, meron din palang mga liability dividends in the form of bond and scrip And then we also have share dividends or what we call bonus issue. So we're going to discuss all of this, no, one by one. So let's start with cash dividends. So for cash dividends, it normally implies distribution of cash, no? And yung cash dividends na i-declare, usually di siya na it's either it can be expressed either a certain amount of peso per share. So sasabihin ang dividend ay piso per share, no? Or a certain percentage of the par value or stated value. So say for example, if the par value is 100 at pag sinabing ang cash dividend is 10%, so ibig sabihin nun, 10 pesos, no, per share yung cash dividend na mare-receive ng mga shareholders. Okay, so we have here an illustration, no? So we have here Zian Company, no? We are given the shareholders equity of Zian Company here as of December 31, 2021. So yung share capital niya, 5 million, yung share premium niya, 1 million, retained earnings niya ay 2 million, no? Ang treasury shares niya, take note meron siyang treasury shares at cost na 600,000. So on December 31, 2021, Zian declared a cash dividend of 30 per share to shareholders of record on January 15, 2022 and payable on January 31, 2022. So if you're going to analyze the problem, no, the date of declaration was December 31, 2021. The date of record is January 15, 2022, and the date of payment is January 31, 2022. Now, maybe the very first problem, no, for cash dividends declarations is that magkano ba ang total dividends na i-distribute ng company, no, or ipipay out ng company. So in this case, sabi niya, it's 30 pesos per share, no? So ang problema natin, saan natin or how many number of shares ba ang entitled to receive dividends, no? So anong klaseng shares ba ang pwedeng makatanggap ng dividends? So in that case, class, take note that only issued and outstanding shares should receive or can receive um, dividends, no, or cash, whatever dividends actually, no, whatever type or form of dividend that is. So ang requirement dapat makakatanggap lang yung issued and outstanding. So in this case, yung issued natin ay 50,000 shares. Kaso lang, merong 5,000 shares na nasa treasury. So ito issued ito pero hindi siya outstanding kasi nasa nasa kamay, no? It's in the hands of the corporation kasi nga binili niya ulit, no, from the shareholders. So ang gagawin natin to compute for the issued and outstanding, so itong 5,000 na to, we have to deduct it from the total shares issued. So that's why yung total natin na outstanding shares is only 45,000 and that number of shares, yun lang yung entitled to receive dividends na natag 30 per share. Okay? So let me proceed to the Excel file na to discuss the answer to this problem. So, ito yung ating gagawin, no, to record the transaction. So again, as I've mentioned, hindi lahat ng 50,000 shares ang makakatanggap ng cash dividends kasi nga um merong mga shares na nasa treasury. So dapat hindi ito 50,000 kundi 45,000. So that 45,000 lang ito. Okay? And then you multiply it by the cash dividend na kanyang dineclare. So, how much is that? So, 45,000. No, kasi meron siyang treasury eh. No, na 45. So, ito lang yung ating pwedeng i-declare as dividends. So, you have here, no, the retained earnings is debited at 1,350,000. That's a total amount no, na equivalent sa 45,000 shares times 30%. Ay, 30 pesos per share. Then, sa date of record, wala tayong entry. And then, sa date of payment, um, so debit lang natin yung dividends payable and credit natin yung cash. So, by the way, class, since no, yung date of payment is sa next year pa, so yung dividends payable natin will still be outstanding when we prepare na our statement of financial position as of December 31, 2021. So, ibig sabihin, itong dividends payable natin ay makikita natin sa ating statement of financial position. And this will be presented under your liability. So, ito liability siya kasi cash dividend yung dineclare ng Board of Directors. Okay? So, that's it. So, ang takeaway dito is that yung cash dividends na ating i-distribute, no, or yung cash dividends or yung dividends, no, will only be given to mga outstanding, no, na mga shares, issued and outstanding na mga shares. So, if ever nakakita kayo ng ganito treasury shares, you have to deduct the number of treasury shares para makuha mo yung issued and outstanding. So, from 50, reduce natin siya by 5,000. So, magiging 45,000 na lang siya. Okay? So, the next type of dividends is itong dividends in kind, no? Or property dividends. So, yung ibibigay ng corporation ay non-cash na asset. So, it could be inventory, it could be investments from other company, it could be PPE, no? So, depende kung ano yung i-declare ng board of directors. So, distributions of earnings to the shareholders in the form of non-cash asset, no? This distribution of non-cash assets to owners. So, yan yung nature ng property dividend. Now, there are two accounting issues no, related to property dividend. So, one is the measurement of the property dividends payable. So, what should be recognized as liability? And the measurement of the non-cash asset to be distributed as property dividend. No? So, magkano o at what amount ba no, natin um, recognize. So, ano yung iti-take natin na value ng asset na ipambibigay natin sa or ipang-distribute natin sa ating mga shareholders. So, measurement of property dividends payable. So, per standard, a liability to distribute a non-cash asset as a dividend to its owner shall be measured at the fair value of the asset to be distributed. So, take note class, no, mag-base tayo sa fair value ng asset na i-distribute natin. And such liability, take note, shall be reviewed at the end of each reporting period and at the date of settlement and i-adjust natin no, to conform with the prevailing fair value of the asset to be distributed. So in short, hindi pa final ang balanse ng ating dividends payable or property dividends payable until until dumating yung settlement date. Kasi if ever may changes doon sa fair value ng asset, you have to adjust no yung liability mo kung magkano man ang fair value ng asset mo at the date of settlement. So any changes in fair value of the non-cash asset to be distributed shall be recognized in equity as an adjustment to the amount of distribution through the retained earnings account. So yan. So pag may fluctuation, like for example, pag First mo, pag dividend declaration, ang fair value lang ng asset is 100. Pero nung nag-settle na, naging 120. So, ibig sabihin, yung na-recognize mo na liability is 150 lang, ay 100 lang. Pero pagdating ng settlement, naging 120 siya. So, before mo i-settle, you have to recognize additional 20,000 or 20 no, na liability. So, that will be debited to your retained earnings and credit to your liability. So, ganun. Okay? And then, another settlement of property dividend payable, no? So, when the entity settles a dividend payable, the difference between the carrying amount of the dividend payable and the carrying amount of the asset distributed shall be recognized in the profit or loss. So, klaro naman siguro ito, no? It has something to do with disposing your asset, your non-cash asset, of which magre-recognize tayo ng gain or loss on distribution of property dividend. So that's carrying amount of the dividend payable versus the carrying amount of the non-cash asset. So ma-determine natin kung meron ba tayong gain or loss on the distribution of property dividend. Okay? So that one, itong difference na to is part of your profit and loss statement. Na it is to be reported in the profit or loss statement or income statement for the period. So measurement of non-cash asset distributed. This is the other issue, no? The non-cash asset for distribution shall be measured at lower of carrying amount and fair value less cost to distribute. So if ever yung fair value less cost to distribute is lower than the carrying amount, then we have to recognize impairment loss. No? So parang apply natin yung concept ng impairment loss. So meron tayong ditong illustration. So in this illustration, we have here Candy Company owned 10,000 equity shares of XYZ Company. Yung carrying amount ng parang investment in equity shares siya, no? Is 90 per share. So on October 31, 2021, Candy Company declared these shares as property dividends to be paid on March 31, 2022. So the quoted price for XYZ share is 130. So ito na yung magiging fair value natin. So again, yung quoted price natin for October 31, 2021 is 130. For December 31, 2021, 150. And for March 31, 2022 is 110. So itong mga quoted price na to, this represents your fair value less cost to dispose, no? So the requirement is to prepare journal entries in connection with the property dividend. So let's proceed to the Excel file na to answer this illustration. So to apply the concept no, that we have just mentioned, na on the date of declaration daw, the dividends payable, na the property dividends that you have to recognize should be equivalent to the fair value of the asset or the non-cash asset that you are going to distribute. So in this case, the fair value of that non-cash assets, kasi yung non-cash asset natin is yung investment in equity shares natin kay XYZ company. So ang fair value nun during the date of declaration, which is October 31, was 130. So that's why we debit no retained earnings at 1.3 million. Then yung credit dividends payable at 1.3 million kasi that's 10,000 times 130. Now, on the reporting date on December 31, 2021, take note class, you have to, what do you call this? Update, no? Or ensure that yung na-recognize natin na dividends payable is at par siya, equivalent siya kung magkano na ang fair value less cost to dispose no, ng ating non-cash asset na ipang babayad as dividends. So in our problem here, yung fair value ng December 31 naging 150, no, compared to 130 noong October 31. So ibig sabihin, tumaas yung fair value ng non-cash assets natin, no? So there's an increase of 200,000. So yung gagawin natin is that i-compare natin, I mean, yung increase in fair value na to, we have to recognize it as additional dividends payable. Kasi dapat, as of December 31, 2021, yung balanse ng ating dividends payable should be equivalent to this 150,000. Okay? So, kaya dagdag tayo ng debit sa retained earnings and then credit sa dividends payable. Now, in terms naman of the non-cash asset, no, kung paano natin i-measure ng non-cash asset na ipambabayad natin as dividends. So, you compare the carrying amount. So, in this case, the carrying amount is 90 per share times 10,000. So, that's 900,000. Compare it to the fair value of XYZ on December 31, which is actually hindi siya 130 but 150, no? So, this should be 150 pesos, no? So, you have 150. So, kung titingnan natin yung fair value ng XYZ shares is mas malaki compared sa carrying amount ng XYZ shares. So, therefore, hindi tayo magre-recognize ng impairment loss kasi mas mataas naman, no, yung fair value ng XYZ share. Kasi ang sabi, di ba, mag-recognize lang tayo ng impairment if yung carrying amount is less than the fair value of your asset, no, or non-cash asset. So in this case, hindi naman, no, mataas yung fair value. So, hindi rin natin i-recognize yung 600,000 na parang gain, no? Gain sa increase in value ng ating non-cash assets. Okay? So, yun yung mga dapat natin gawin sa reporting date. So, proceed tayo sa date of distribution or yung settlement date na natin. So, yung settlement natin is on March 31. And this time, or at this time, yung balanse ng ating, or yung fair value ng ating property na i-distribute ay nag-decrease, no? From 150 ng December 31, naging 110 na lang sa March 31. So, if that's the case, no, before natin siya i-distribute sa mga shareholders, di ba ang sabi, adjust muna natin yung ating liability. No? So, since ang fair value is, di ba sabi natin ang liability natin sa dividends is equivalent sa fair value ng non-cash asset ng ating ipang distribute. So, since ngayon, ang balanse na lang is 110, no? So, yung amount na lang is 1.1 na lang. Yung kanyang talagang final niya na babayaran or final na yun na dividends payable. Tapos yung record natin, kasi nag-adjust tayo ng December, naging 1.5 ang balanse ng ating dividends payable. So, there's a decrease in the fair value amounting to 400,000. So, if that's the case, no, kasi nag-reduce ang ating dividends payable, so you have to debit dividends payable, then credit it to retained earnings. Ang effect nito, from 1.5 na balanse natin noong December 31, deduct natin yung 400,000, so magiging 1.1 na lang siya. So equivalent na sa fair value as of March 31, which is the updated or the latest fair value also of the shares of this XYZ company. Okay? So, finally, no, na-adjust na natin yung dividends payable. Debit lang natin ang ating dividends payable at 1.1 million. Kasi ito na yung balanse ng dividends natin or dividends payable natin per record also after this adjustment here sa taas. So, credit natin yung investment in equity securities at carrying amount. Of course, that's 900,000. So, may sobra pa tayo, no? Gain on distribution of property dividend amounting to 200,000. So, itong gain na to, this will be reported in your profit and loss statement. So I hope that was clear, no? Na-understand yung paano i-account yung property dividends. So moving forward, dito tayo, no? What if yung dividends na dineclare ng Board of Directors ay ano siya, no? May option yung mga shareholders na mamili, no? Kung ano lang gustong matanggap. Either non-cash asset ba or cash alternative ba? No, cash asset ba? Non-cash ba or cash alternative, no? So the entity shall estimate. In this case, no, pag ganito yung sitwasyon, the entity shall estimate the dividend payable by considering both the fair value of each alternative and the associated probabilities of owners selecting each alternative, no? So integrate natin yung effect ng probability, no, based on experience, no, based on past, no, na experience ng company, ano yung most probably choice ng mga owners, no? So integrate natin yan in accounting for your dividend distribution na merong dalawang options. So what you have to do is you adjust the dividends payable based on the alternative chosen. So this is during the um, date of settlement, no? And then through equity or retained earnings at the end of this reporting period and at the settlement date. So yung related to non-cash na alternative, for example, na ating na-allocate, yun yung ating i-adjust yung dividend payable na every time. Okay, so let's just have an illustration here para mas maklaro no kung paano siya i-apply in a problem. So on December 31, 2021, an entity declared dividends on ordinary shares payable on March 31, 2022. So the entity decided to give the shareholders a choice between a total cash dividends of 2 million, no? So yung cash alternative is 2 million, or a property dividend in the form of non-cash asset from the inventory with a carrying amount of 2.5 and a fair value less cost to distribute of 3 million. So the entity estimated that 70%, no, of the shareholders shall take the option of the cash dividend while 30% shall elect the non-cash asset. So how do we account for this one, no? So if there's a choice of a cash dividend or a non-cash asset na as property dividends, so unang-unang class, i-estimate muna natin, no, yung dividend payable. Kasi hindi natin alam kung magkano yung total, no? So consider natin yung dalawang options, no? So yung cash, using the probability, no? The associated probabilities of each alternative. So the first alternative, yung cash natin, sabi niya 70% chance ang mag-a-avail, no, sa cash alternative. So with that, minultiply lang, no, 70% of the 2 million. So meron tayong 1.4 million. Whereas, yung cash alternative or non-cash alternative natin is 30% of the 3 million. 3 million, take note, is the fair value, no? Less cost to sell of your inventory to be distributed. Kasi ito yung um, rule, no? Or provision ng standard kung ano yung basis kapag non-cash yung binigay sa mga shareholders. So yan, 3 million, dyan yun galing, no? Or dun yun galing ang 3 million. So 30% times 3 million, so you have 900,000. So i-recognize natin na dividends payable, 2.3 million is actually composed of two, no? Parang cash dividend payable ito and ito ay property dividend na component. But when you're going to record it, no, on the date of declaration, so pag-isahin mo na lang, no? Debit retained earnings at 2.3, credit dividends payable at 2.3. Now, pagdating ng settlement date, no? Say for example, on March 31, this is a settlement date na. So yung mga shareholders, for example, yung mga shareholders daw ang pinili ay cash alternative. So if that's the case, then ang gagawin lang natin ay ide-debit lang natin yung ating dividend or dividends payable na 2.3 kasi ise-settle na natin yun. And then, i-credit natin yung cash na ibabayad natin na 2 million. And then, adjust natin yung retained earnings natin by 300,000. Kasi di ba initially, retained earnings was debited for 2.3 million. So, since yung final naman na settlement is only 2 million, yung sobrang 300,000, ibalik natin siya sa retained earnings. Okay. So, next, what if the shareholders have chosen the non-cash alternative and the fair value of the inventory remained at 3 million on March 31, 2022? So, from 2.3, yung 2.3, yung na-record natin na dividends payable, kasi sabi pag non-cash yung dividends, dapat yung payable natin ay equivalent sa fair value ng non-cash asset na yon. So, ibig sabihin, dapat 3 million. Kaso yung na-record natin or na-recognize natin is only 2.3 million. So, therefore, kulang tayo ng 700,000. So, we increase our dividends payable by debiting retained earnings, crediting dividends payable at 700,000. So, to record distribution of property dividends, so ito na. So, debit natin ang dividends payable, 3 million. Inventory, which was given, this 2.5 years the carrying amount of the inventory. So, let's try to take a look. So, yan. Carrying amount is 2.5 million. Okay, so dyan yun galing. Carrying amount yan. So, meron tayong gain on distribution of property dividend amounting to 500,000. Take note, class, wala tayong impairment loss, no? Kasi nga, yung carrying amount 2.5, pero yung fair value naman ng inventory as of March 31 is 3 million. So, mas malaki yung fair value compared sa carrying amount. So, walang impairment na i-recognize. So, what if daw yung inventory, no? Instead na 3 million lang, what if nag-increase ang kanyang fair value? So, from 3 million, nung estimate niya pag-declare, ngayon, naging 3.3 million siya. So, you have to recognize the increase in dividends payable. So, this time, 1 million yun yung difference. No? So, 2.3 na yung record natin na dividends payable. Tapos ngayon, 3.3 na. So, i-recognize natin yung difference na 1 million. And then, record natin yung distribution ng property dividend. So, debit, dividends payable, 3.3, credit inventory at 2.5, and credit gain on distribution of property dividend at 800,000. Okay? So, that's the case, no? If merong alternative na binigay. So, proceed tayo sa next type of dividend. Ito, scrip dividend is a type of a liability dividend, no? Wherein yung ipambabayad, no, or utangin muna ng corporation ang dividend. Nasa yung scrip dividend. So, we have here illustration. Parang yung nangyari, class, instead of giving out cash immediately, baka wala pang cash yung company or corporation. So, ang gagawin nila, issue lang muna sila ng scrip, no, dividends, or mag-declare lang muna sila ng scrip dividend. Of course, meron siyang interest, no, depending on what is designated or approved by the board of directors. So, meron tayong dito illustration. So, scrip dividends are declared in the amount of 200,000 payable in 6 months at 12%. So, pag ganun, recognize lang natin yung amount ng scrip dividend natin. So, debit retained earnings, no? 200,000 credit, scrip dividends payable at 200,000. So, pag present na for redemption ng mga shareholders na after 6 months, yung script, no, yung note or script, no. So what you're going to do is just debit the script dividends payable. That's 200,000. And then debit the interest expense, which is equivalent to 6 months at 12%. So that's 12,000. So yung ibabayad ng corporation to the shareholders will be a total of 212,000. So yan, very straightforward lang ito, no? During the settlement, you just have to recognize the interest, no? The related interest. And also if ever, no, na yung dividend declaration and the date of settlement is not the same year, na like kunyari nag-declare siya December 1, magbabayad siya pagka March 1 pa. So, or mare-redeem siya na after how many years, after how many months pa. So, just make sure to recognize also accrued interest on the scrip dividends payable. So, for example, kung December 1 yun na declare or na-issue, so that mag-accrue siya ng 1 month interest as of December 31, 20. I mean, at the end of the year, no? So December 31 if they're following calendar year. So that's scrip dividend. Next is bond dividend. So yung concept is just the same, no? This is still a liability dividend. So walang pera yung corporation pero malaki yung balanse ng kanilang retained earnings. So pwede silang and that's really possible, no, na malaki ang retained earnings kasi malaki yung net income na na-report pero walang cash. Kasi 'di ba sa accounting we're following accrual basis. So kahit hindi mo pa nakolekta, basta naka-perform ka na ng service, earned na yon na sa accrual accounting. So it could be na malaki yung retained earnings mo kasi malaki yung profitability mo, pero wala kang pera pambayad ng dividends na i-declare. So ang gagawin, mag-issue muna ng liability dividend. Another example of that is itong bond dividend. So dividends are declared, ito illustration na, dividends are declared in the amount of 1 million payable in entities owned bonds, no? 12% interest payable annually, 1 million face a month. So the bonds mature in 5 years. So this one to record the dividend declaration or to record the declaration of the bond dividend. So we debit retained earnings, we credit bond dividends payable. And then ito issuance ng bonds and payment of the dividends. Sa debit bond dividends payable, no? Pag binigay na yung bonds payable sa mga shareholders or bonds, no? Yung certificate or parang proof of ownership ng bonds. So you'd have debit bonds dividend payable and then credit bonds payable. And then after distributing the bonds payable, you just account for the bonds payable just like how you account bonds payable in the previous discussion ng bonds payable. So it's just accounting for bonds payable now. No, like for the interest, of course, you have to recognize, no, every year or every interest payment dates. And then, if ever naman na may discount or premium, ano mo din, you also have to report it, no, or to amortize it. So, ganun. So, yung concepts or theory related to bonds payable applies already here. So, yung pinakita lang dito sa illustration is that, mga simple lang na like ito during the interest payment dates, no? Ito yung entry niya ng corporation and then if ever nag-redeem na yung bonds at maturity date, so yan, just debit bonds payable and credit cash no, for 1 million. So hindi na kinomplicate, no? Kasi yung bonds payable natin dito is equivalent lang no, sa kanyang principal amount or face amount ng bonds. So yan. So walang discount, walang premium. So wala tayong i-amortize and walang makakaapekto pa, no? Any items pa affecting interest expense to be reported by the entity as really or regarding or related to this issuance of bonds, no, as dividends. So that's bond dividend. So proceed tayo. I think this is the last item or not yet pa. So share dividend or other will term it as stock dividend. So IS term for this item is bonus issue. So distribution of earnings of the entity in the form of entity's own share, no? So yung ibibigay, unlike kanina sa example ng property dividend na shares yun ng ibang corporation. So ito, um, shares ito, yung i-distribute as earnings is shares talaga ng entity, their own shares. So, share dividend when declared, yung retained earnings natin ay kakapitalize. So, what we're going to do is we just transfer, no, some of the balances sa ating retained earnings sa ating share capital. So, therefore, kasi, because of that, no, walang changes. Pag may share dividend, wala siyang changes sa assets ng company before and after the issuance of share dividends. Its effect is just decreasing the retained earnings and increasing the share capital, no? Transfer lang natin yung amount, no, from retained earnings to share capital. And take note, share dividends can be ordinary share dividends or special share dividends. So you say ordinary share dividends, ibig sabihin na kung ang shareholder is holding ordinary shares, they're also receiving ordinary shares or they'll also receive ordinary share. If the shareholder is a preference shareholder, then that shareholder also receive preference shares as dividend. Now, pag sinabing special share dividends, ibig sabihin, class, no? Kunyari, ordinary shareholder siya, pero yung matatanggap niya ay preference shares as dividend. Or preference shareholder siya, pero yung matatanggap niya ay ordinary share. So, iba yung matatanggap niyang class of or ibang type or class of share yung matatanggap niya as compared to the shares na um, pag-aari niya, no, sa corporation na yun. Proceed tayo sa share dividend, no? Kasi yung question dito, ano yung amount na ide-debit natin sa retained earnings, no? Kasi yun yung concern natin. Some of the amounts of the retained earnings, transfer natin siya sa share capital. But the question is, how much, no? How much is that amount? So, dito papasok yung concept ng small share dividend and large share dividend. So, pag sinabing small share dividend class, no, yung share dividend na declare is only less than 20%. No? So, less than 20% of the outstanding and issued, no, issued and outstanding shares. So, retained earnings is charged at fair value at the date of declaration. So, again, take note, pag small share dividend, no, ang percentage declared is less than 20%. So, pag less than 20%, small share dividend yun. And pag small share dividend siya, ang retained earnings ay ika-capitalize mo at fair value, no, of the shares on the date of declaration. So, ibig sabihin, kung mag-record ka ng dividend declaration, debit mo share, debit mo retained earnings, no? And then credit mo share dividend distributable, and the amount should be equivalent to the number of shares na i-declare as dividends times its fair value on the date of declaration. So, yan yung ating fair value ang ating basis kapag small share dividend. Now, if the dividend declared is 20% or more, so that share dividend declaration is considered a large share dividends. So, pag large share dividends class, the retained earnings is charged at par or stated value. So, yun yung ating magiging amount na ide-debit sa retained earnings na mag-base tayo sa par value or stated value. So, meron tayo ditong illustration. So, say for example here, yung share capital natin ay 1 billion. That's coming from 10,000 shares issued and outstanding. Take note, issued and outstanding yan. Share premium is 500,000. Retained earnings is 500,000. So, the entity now declared a 20% share dividend. So, that's 20% of the 10,000 or 2 share for every 10 shares held, no, a total of 2,000 shares a share dividend. Shares issued and, yan, no, 20% based on the share issued and outstanding, which is 10,000. So, since this is 20%, no, this is considered as a large share dividend. And sabi natin, pag large share dividend, mag-base tayo sa par value. So, yung 2,000 shares na to, i-debit, I mean, i-multiply natin sa par value ng share, which is 100. So, the retained earnings should be debited at 200,000. And then, credit natin yung share dividends payable at 200,000. Let's just take note that share dividends payable is not considered a liability. No? Share dividends payable is not considered a financial liability. You should always remember that because if ever the share dividends payable account is outstanding as of year end, no, as of the reporting period, itong amount na to, itong account na ito, i-add mo siya, no, i-present mo siya under shareholders equity. So, itong share dividends payable. Again, hindi siya financial liability, but this is an equity item, share dividends payable. Other term this as share dividends distributable. Okay, so this is on the date of declaration. And then on the date of distribution, you simply debit share dividends payable and then credit share capital at par. So notice there's no share premium kasi nga we only debited the dividends declared at par value. Okay, we have here another illustration. So we have same no, 10,000 lang din yung shares issued and outstanding niya. Share premium is 500, retained earnings is 750. So this time they only declared 10%, no? And we're given the market value of the share at 150. So if that's 10%, so 10% of 10,000 shares issued and outstanding, ibig sabihin magde-declare sila or magde-distribute sila ng 1,000 shares as share dividend. So since 10% lang ito, this is a small share dividend. And again, pag small share dividend, we are going to capitalize it at its par value on the date of declaration. So it is 150. So yung 1,000 shares natin, i-multiply natin siya sa 150. So we have a debit the retained earnings of 150,000. And then credit share dividends payable at 100,000. And in excess, no, credit natin to share premium at 50,000. So again, this is during the date of declaration, no? On the date of distribution, since nakapag-recognize na tayo ng share premium, no? When the dividends were declared, you are going to simply transfer na lang, no, your share dividends payable, reclassify it to share capital at 100,000. No? So that's equivalent to the par value of the share. Okay, so that's for the small share dividend. Now, what if, no, merong mga tinatawag na fractional share dividend? Kasi class, no, imposible naman, no, that when share dividends are issued, it's really impossible to issue full shares, no, to all of the shareholders. Kasi, example, no, yung dineclare na dividend is 10%. Tapos yung shareholder only owns 45 shares. So, 45 times 10%. So, makakatanggap siya ng 4.5 shares lang. So, bale, full shares and a fractional of 1/2, no, 0.5 or 1/2 share. So, there's no accounting problem, no, for the issuance of the full shares. But with respect to the fractional shares, the following steps may be taken. So, one, the entity may issue share warrants for the fractional shares and give the holders enough time to accumulate sufficient warrants for a full share. So, hintayin lang muna, no? Mag-issue na lang ng share warrants. Hintayin na um, mabuo yung isang share para ma, ma, I mean, makapag-avail, no, ng buong share ang shareholder. So, the entity may pay cash in lieu of fractional shares, no? And this is only applicable if the source of the dividends is retained earnings and not share premium. So take note of that, no? Pwede bayaran na lang ng corporation ng cash, no, yung fractional share. Pero only applicable, and it's also a decision of the board of directors, and only applicable when the source of the dividends is really from retained earnings and not from share premium. So we have here an illustration. So meron tayong share capital na 10,000 shares. So 1 million. So share dividends declared is 50%. So ibig sabihin 5,000. And then binigyan tayo na ang full shares daw, no? Sila na ang nagkwenta. So 4,000 daw ang full shares and fractional shares is 1,000. So when the share dividends are declared, it's just the same, no? You just debit kasi 50% ito. So, ibig sabihin large share dividend ito. So, you debit it to retained earnings at par value. So, we have 500,000. And then we credit share dividends payable of 500,000. So, when the full share dividends and fractional share dividends are issued, you're going to debit the share dividends payable at 500,000. And then credit share capital at 400,000. So this one is related to the full share na credit na natin sa share capital. And then credit fractional share warrants outstanding. So yan, share warrants na lang for the fractional dividends of 1,000 shares. So that's 100,000. So still, ano pa rin siya, no? Base pa rin sa par value. So take note that the fractional share warrants outstanding is part of your share premium. And if ever hindi ma-exercise ng mga shareholders, if ever na hindi ma-exercise ng mga shareholders yung share warrants, ita-transfer lang din yung fractional share warrants outstanding to share premium. Thank you. Okay. So next topic would be the treasury shares na as share dividends. So is it possible that treasury shares are declared as share dividends? Treasury shares may be issued as dividends as mentioned here. And if treasury shares are issued as dividends, we are going to debit it, no, at cost of the treasury shares to retained earnings. So meaning yung i-debit natin sa retained earnings is equivalent to the cost of the treasury share. So declaration of treasury shares as dividend is termed as property dividend under the Philippine Corporation Code. But considering now that the treasury share is a component of the shareholder's equity and not a financial asset, it is believed that it shall be accounted as share dividend rather than property dividend. So we have here an illustration. So an entity distributed a share dividend of 1,000 treasury share with a cost of 100,000 and a market value of 120. So ito class yung dinebit niya na amount sa retained earnings is 100,000. So we credit share dividends payable, and then when it will be distributed, just debit treasury, or I mean debit share dividends payable and credit treasury shares. So we also have special cases on share dividend, no? Like, for example, here in the first bullet, when shareholders may elect, no, to receive cash in lieu of share dividend, so the amount to be charged to retained earnings should be equivalent to the optional cash dividend. So, kunyari, ang dineclare na dividend is share dividend, pero yung may option ang shareholder na cash dividend yung kanyang gustong matanggap, no, or cash yung gusto niyang tanggapin. So, if that is available, no, at the option of the shareholders, so dapat ang i-debit mo sa retained earnings is yung optional na cash dividend, no? And then, in cases where the share dividends are declared on the basis of a proposed increase in authorized share capital, tapos hindi pa siya approved sa SEC at the end of the reporting period, no? So, nag-declare ng share dividends based on the increased, no, na authorized share capital. Like for example, nag-apply ang corporation ng increase sa share cap na increase sa authorized share capital from 5 million, gusto nilang gawing 10 million. Now, pag hindi pa yun approved, no, sa SEC, take note that such dividend declaration shall not be reflected muna in the statement of financial position prior to SEC approval, no? But it can just be disclosed, no? Disclose lang natin siya sa FS, but hindi natin siya pwedeng i-reflect, no, as part of your dividends na payable. So if the proposed increase was approved by SEC, pero take note, after na the end of the reporting period, the share dividends are subsequently no, tinik effect talaga yung share dividends, no, binase na yung share dividends na declare based dun sa bagong authorized share capital ng corporation, then the new authorized share capital daw may be presented and the share dividend may be shown as part of the issued share capital. Pero kailangan natin i-disclose, no, yung um, i-disclose natin ang information na yun, na it was the new authorized share capital was only approved by SEC after the end of the reporting period, yet kinonsider siya in computing for the dividends, no, na dineclare. So, ganun. Another is, no, for closely held entities, no, yung mga hindi publicly traded, yung mga closed corporations. So take note that if they are going to declare share dividends, the retained earnings will be capitalized only to up to the extent of the par value or stated value. So walang small or large dividend or share dividend kapag closely held ang entity, no, as compared to publicly held or mga publicly accountable na mga corporations. So, regardless of the percentage of the share dividends, ang gagamitin natin, no, ikakapitalize lang natin yung share dividends, i-debit natin siya sa retained earnings using the par value or stated value of the share. And then we have dividends out of capital. So, tapos na tayong nag-discuss na sa mga dividends as a return of capital, no? Dividends as a return on the capital. Ito, dividends out of capital. So it's a liquidating dividend. It's tantamount to returning the capital to the shareholders. And take note, for Corporation Code of the Philippines, no, it should only be paid to the entity or it should only be paid to shareholders when the entity is dissolved and liquidated. Kasi if you're going to pay out what you call legal dividends during the lifetime of the corporation, it will violate the trust fund doctrine. And trust fund doctrine states that it will be illegal for a corporation to return the capital of the share or return the capital to the shareholders during the lifetime of the corporation. Why? No? Kasi nga, wala na bang ibang habol yung mga creditors na ng corporation sa corporation in case mag-file sila ng bankruptcy. Remember, mga shareholders na liability is limited lang kapag corporate form of business. So to protect no the creditors and other mga lenders, so that's why um meron tayo nitong trust fund doctrine. So bawal isauli no during the lifetime ang legal capital ng corporation during its lifetime or during yes no unless it's dissolved and liquidated, pwede nang isauli. But during its lifetime, bawal yun under the trust fund doctrine. Although there's an exception no, ditong sa wasting asset doctrine na applicable lang sa mga wasting asset corporations. Like mga corporations no involved in extracting mineral resources. So kasi yung nature lang din naman ng operations ng uh, nature ng operations ng mga wasting asset corporations is limited time lang siya. So if ever na makonsume na yung wasting assets na minimina nila or na-extract nila, they can't do anything about it also but to stop their operation. Kasi nga, yun yung nature ng wasting asset. Once na-extract na, once na-consume mo na, hindi mo na siya maibabalik. It's irreplaceable, no? It's irreplaceable. And because of that, itong sa wasting asset doctrine, no, for those type of corporations, pwede nilang isauli yung kanilang um, capital or legal capital during the lifetime of the corporation. It should just to be accounted accordingly, no? So, meron tayong sample dito, no? Ito yung ating accounts appearing in the statement of financial position of a wasting asset entity. So, meron tayong asset, no? Resource property of 10 million, accumulated depletion of 2 million, and then the retained earnings is 3 million. So, if this is a wasting asset corporation, a maximum dividend na pwede lang ma-declare is 5 million. So, that's composed of 2M, accumulated depletion, and 3M, retained earnings, no? So, if ever na dineclare talaga yung maximum amount, so ganito yung magiging entry natin. Debit mo yung retained earnings na 3 million, and then yung 2 million na galing sa accumulated depletion, i-debit mo sa capital liquidated, no? And that capital liquidated is a deduction from your total shareholders' equity. And then credit dividends payable at 5 million. Assuming that this is a cash dividends, no? So, yan. Okay, then we have dividends as expense. So, pwede ba na yung dividends ay consider natin as expense? So, yes, na the answer is yes. Dividends out of earnings are usually charged to retained earnings, diba? Just like your cash dividend, your scrip dividend, your property dividend, your bond dividend, your share dividend even, no? Or even treasury shares declared as dividends, no? Now, there are cases, class, wherein yung dividends is considered siya as an expense and not to be charged as part of the equity or not to be charged under retained earnings. So, kailan yan mangyayari, no? This happens when the distributions, no, to holders, when there's distribution to holders of equity instruments, which are classified as financial liability. No? So if you can still recall, may mga equity instrument na kapag meron siyang fixed na redemption period, meron siyang fixed, so parang foreseeable future yung, meron talaga siyang matatawag mo na maturity date. For example, yung mga redeemable preference share. So these are not really, no, in substance, equity instrument, but rather yung kanilang, ang treatment sa kanila ay financial liability talaga because um, meron siyang specific date na kailan mo siya i-redeem, kailan siya i-redeem ng company. So in that sense, no, because of that, if magbibigay tayo ng dividends no, sa mga preference shareholders na redeemable, yung feature, yung dividends na ibibigay natin sa kanila ay i-recognize natin in the same way as interest expense in a bond. So, instead of debiting it to retained earnings, we are going to debit it as interest expense, no? Kasi yung treatment natin sa mga redeemable preference shares or financial liability and yung concept, yung provisions na ng financial liability ang dapat i-apply sa ganitong klase na um, mga shares, no? So with that, no, yung interest expense natin, i-report natin sa income statement, either with interest on other liabilities or as a separate line item, no? So pwede natin ano, so depende lang. The point is, yung dividend payments for equity instruments na considered as financial liability should not be debited to retained earnings, but rather debited, no, treated as interest expense lang, just like a bond, no, na payable. Okay, so that's the end of the presentation. I hope you learned something from this video, and if you have questions, just feel free to ask during our face-to-face discussions. Bye, class.